Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am joined today by my colleague and co-host, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on?
Today is a lovely day, and I am enjoying life, and all the comments about the last episode are making me happy and laugh.
I've avoided some of them, to be honest.
We apparently struck a nerve. We struck a nerve. Everyone hates Ben except us. What can I say?
Yeah, and I don't get it. And I'm going to pull a few things here. I'm going to go right out the gate here. But before I do, Brian, it's good to see your smart device is working properly now, and all of our technical issues are weeded out. People don't hear about these. They don't get to see the gag reel or the blooper things that happen behind the scenes here. So I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit and let everyone know that Brian is a little dumb using the smart devices.
Well, look, my monitors were on, so clearly I did not tell my smart assistant, whose name I will not say because then she'll wake up,
yes,
to turn off my office. And therefore, I don't know why the one plug died, but maybe it just had a power surge.
Yeah, something or other. Weird, right? Smartphones, dumb people. I always tell people when we're working on computer stuff, as you probably do too, usually someone asks, well, what was the problem? And it's very tough to just not say user error. And that usually means you're the idiot. They're only as smart as the person operating it. But, that's kind of where this is a good segue for, I don't necessarily want to call our listeners idiots. There's valid points out there. I know a lot of people, yourself included, Brian, are old enough to remember when Terry Bradshaw threw his last pass and kind of what that looked like. So, I mean, there's a little bit of, cause for concern or hesitation. But when you, if any of you went back and read Bob Labriola's Asked and Answered, which is on Steelers.com, Bob Labriola, I don't want to say acquired taste. I love him. I know for some people they don't, because he'll tell you how it is, and it's a fresh breath of air. And I got something else that goes along with that in a second. But somebody had asked Bob Labriola, it was actually a Nick Moses. If you are listening, Nick, hello. We're reading your comment here. How concerned are you that Ben Roethlisberger never will play at a higher level for us again? And Bob says, not that concerned. The procedure was performed by a top orthopedic surgeon. There are constantly or significant advances being made in sports medicine. Very valid. And I believe Ben Roethlisberger is very serious about returning to the level where he can help the Steelers compete for a championship, and therefore will attack his rehabilitation with the same competitive spirit with which he has played the sport. Sure, there are inherent risks with any surgery, and those risks might be compounded by his age, but some years ago, Adrian Peterson had significant knee surgery and returned well within a calendar year to become one of the NFL's premier running backs again. I will also say Peyton Manning returned from a neck surgery, and Andrew Luck was, let's not talk about that one. So there's cause for concern there. And one other thing I'm going to throw in here real quick, because it's on the same Asked and Answered segment from yesterday. Someone had asked, what do you see as Paxton Lynch's future with the Steelers? And would a full year of OTAs, minicamps help solidify Lynch as Ben Roethlisberger's backup and eventual successor, or is Lynch destined to be waived? And Bob's answer is Paxton Lynch is under contract to the Steelers through the 2020 season at a salary that will be absolutely no strain on the team's salary cap. I fully expect him to participate in the offseason program, including OTAs and minicamps that he brought to training camp at St. Vincent College, and then be given a chance to compete for a roster spot during the preseason. And doing that, the Steelers will give Lynch an opportunity to determine his own future with the team. Very, what do you want to say, politically correct in how he handled that. Paxton Lynch, a former first-round draft pick, and as we know and we talked about with quarterbacks, first-round draft picks aren't necessarily a surefire thing, and we kind of skipped over the guy that was on their roster. We were talking about, Mason Rudolph, he's a veteran now. He has NFL playing time experience. So does Duck Hodges. Well, so does Paxton Lynch. So they actually do have another guy. So everyone going to reach for that other quarterback. I don't know where all this comes from. Maybe it's just a lot of people that really got into the pre-draft hype when you go back to that draft. What was that, the 2016 draft where they took Artie Burns and then Paxton Lynch went to Denver right after that? A lot of people thought Paxton would be the future. A lot of people thought Brock Osweiler could have been the future also in Denver, and then he signed a large contract in Houston, and he's never to be seen again after bouncing around. The Cleveland Browns didn't even keep him. So, I mean, that just tells you a little bit about what goes on here with how the quarterback position could be in the league. But I wanted to bring up that Paxton is a veteran and a former first-round draft pick, just to kind of throw that into the mix. But combining that with all the things with Ben, it's like, hey, look, they're going to roll with Ben. There's no reason to believe there's any setbacks at this point. And as far as, the rest of the quarterback situation, you got 3 guys with experience, several of them with a high pedigree coming out of college that are going to compete in camp. And what more can you ask for than that? Are you really going to want to, muddy the waters and throw something else in that equation? I don't want to. So I don't know how you feel about it, Brian, but that's about all the more I got to say about the quarterback position before we move on today.
Yeah, look, I think I expressed myself, fully in the last episode on what I think, which is that Ben will come back. And let me echo what you said. There certainly is always a chance, but I don't think it's a significant chance that he does not come back and perform well. For those who are reflecting on the first 2 games of the season and saying he stunk, well, he was hurt. I mean, that's just the bottom line. He was hurt. He wasn't 100%. Certainly, we know that is 100% true for the Seahawks game. And while it may not be 100% true for the Patriots game, there's enough indication from people on the team speaking out about it that it could be. You may have injured that elbow in training camp or in a preseason game. Who knows? I don't think you can look at it and say, okay, the guy who threw for 5,000 yards the year before has seriously declined in his abilities. And people want to blame Ben for that season as well. We noticed in the commentary, or at least I did. And we do read your comments, by the way, and we appreciate them greatly.
Oh yeah.
Even when they mock us and say silly things about us, I don't mind. I appreciate the fact that you listened and that you were willing to make the comment.
Well, that's what I meant by avoiding. There's some that I just won't reply to. I'm like, I'm not opening that can of worms. I'm like, you have your opinion and that's great. And then there's the trolls that come in, usually from another team, that say something completely derogatory and vulgar, and it has to be removed. So always out there, I got to put the troll alert out there for
absolutely.
Folks.
But the bottom line is, look, I think Ben will come back. I feel comfortable in saying that is going to be a vast improvement at quarterback from what we saw in the just finished season. And Paxton Lynch will indeed get his opportunity to try and compete. Will he play better than Duck Hodges and get the 3rd string spot? Will he play better than Mason? Who knows? We're not going to find that out until next season. Remember that in that Jets game, Mason Rudolph came in and looked better. Maybe the benching did him some good. We'll have to see how that transpires to the next season and what happens as we move forward. Everybody knows my stated sentiment about Mason, which is I think he'll make a fine backup. But that's it. And just the last thing I want to say is, my condolences to you, sir, on the injury to the GOAT.
Oh.
One Landry Jones.
Oh, yeah. Well, what was it, 4 to 6 weeks? So he's going to miss the very beginning of the XFL season. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that just because I think I mentioned it before. Aside from the teasing and my support of Landry not being a complete waste of human flesh, as some people would make it sound, with all of these quarterbacks, to be completely honest. There are some folks who are actually, I'm going to give, I'm not the only one that's out there, believe it or not, probably at the time when he was with the Steelers. But this past year, there were several people that were asking, where's he at and how can we bring him back? Because they then realized just, hey, this guy didn't completely stink the joint out. He was capable. You know what I mean? And we say that a lot, too. It's like, there's different levels of quarterbacks. It's like, can you you at least lead the team and not screw up and maybe win some games? Maybe not necessarily a franchise guy, but at least a starter. You know what I mean? Can you be a starting quarterback or a spot starter? And then there's franchise guys, and then there's, the elite tier of guys as well, your Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers and whatnot. And, we were talking about even like the free agent thing. Something came out again. Somebody was like, anything that says anything about free agency that's, dated these next 2 months before March, when we get like a week or two before free agency, okay, we could start to, usually you have the rumblings and if somebody's going to be back and things of that nature. But, up until that point, let's not discuss whether Drew Brees is going to be in a Saints uniform or Bridgewater or Brady in a Patriots uniform or any of these other things. But probably the only guy that's really going to go out there, they're speculating about Phillip Rivers too, but Eli Manning, it seems like they're ready to move on, obviously, because they took Daniel Jones and played him, and now they got a new coach and all this other stuff. And, Eli's up there in age too. He's got a couple years or year and a half on Ben and whatnot. So, those things happen, but just boomeranging back around to Paxton Lynch, who had his opportunity with 2 years with the Denver Broncos. He didn't even last like his whole rookie contract. He would be going on what? He would have had the 5th-year option this year, because that would have been 2016, right? No, he would be going into, they would have had to option him. So he would have been the 4th year of his rookie contract, because that's the same thing with Artie Burns. And then he may have still been with the Denver Broncos, the original team that drafted him. That's the reason why I'm bringing him up in this conversation. And part of this conversation, too, is that all the different things dealing with the salary cap, this is going to come back around the Ben Roethlisberger and his figure, because some people are like, hey, just trade him or get rid of him. And I'm going to bring that up in a second and bring us into our topic of the day. But, 2 years with the Broncos completely out of football in 2018, that means none of the 32 teams in the NFL thought he was worthy. So this just isn't like some thing like a witch hunt against one particular quarterback in the league. There are other guys who can't get work, who have been former first-round draft picks and whatnot, and have started in the NFL that people don't think enough of to have on their roster. I get, I said all the things about him being a physical specimen and whatnot, but apparently, if the Broncos didn't even want to keep him around for whatever his salary was as a first-rounder, that's pretty telling. And that no other team even threw a dart at him, being a former first-round pick. Usually first-round picks get second chances all around, and even Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, they brought him into camp last year and cut him. He didn't make the regular season roster, and I'm not sure how much of a fit he would be. You're talking about a drastic difference, a paradigm shift between him and Russell Wilson anyway, so that could be just a system or scheme thing where he wouldn't fit. So
yeah, and there's actually a point that that Rocky Bleier makes. If you haven't read his book, which I just finished for like the 3rd time. I've read it many times, the Fighting Back book. But he talks about coaches who fall in love with those physical traits that you were talking about. And Mike Tomlin, it can be seen as one of those kind of guys at times. Think about Alejandro Villanueva and Zach Banner and these guys who are huge guys. And he looks at them and goes, oh, wow, I can turn them into something. And so it really does kind of say something about Paxton Lynch, who has the measurables, and yet still nobody is interested. They saw some tape and they didn't like it.
Yeah, and I know some of that was some of the knock in college. A lot of people loved him coming out of college. A lot of people were like very similar to what the Mitchell Trubisky type stuff. Hey, this guy, he didn't play enough, or he didn't play against enough big teams and this and that. And you see, well, that could be shaky. That could be on rocky ground too with him. So, but I think the whole point here is that, we're talking today. This kind of stems from an article I put on the website a couple of days ago by the same title, because I was lazy. Cutting several Steelers to create cap space could cause other problems. Now, Ben Roethlisberger was not part of that, so this is some bonus coverage for all you folks. But we started with the quarterback position first, because there's 2 sites you could basically get this information off of. And I don't know that it's always 100% accurate. The guys at Over the Cap claim to be the most accurate of them all. And then there's Spot Track, which sometimes I have found spotty information on their site. But there's 2 different sites you could get this information on. And through our rudimentary knowledge of the salary cap, we are not the all-knowing cap wizards, because there's all kinds of crazy things with these contracts and stipulations and ins and outs too. But I would try and talk in generic terms, and I think the most generic term here is if Ben Roethlisberger is just straight out released, he has a cap savings of $8.5 million. That'll get you towards Bud Dupree, right, Brian? Because, I mean, this is what this is all about. A lot of people, all the people who hated Bud Dupree last year that have changed your mind, I'm going to give you my address to send me a thank you card or an apology in the mail. You could do it at the fan mail at steelcityunderground.com, too, and just say, Joe, I was one of those guys that thought Bud Dupree didn't have it. And there's still people who are like, he could be a one-year wonder and things like that. Okay, I get it. But for all intents and purposes, I think everybody has him as the top priority, right? And I'm kind of jumping the gun here, too, because what I wanted to do was, this was also for Bob Labriola, too. You got to talk about the unrestricted free agents to be. There's Artie Burns, there's Sean Davis, Bud Dupree, B.J. Finney, Javon Hargrave, Tyler Matakevich, Nick Vannett, and L.T. Walton. And let me see. That's everybody, right? And then restricted would be we didn't have Mike Hilton in that list, so Mike Hilton is still a restricted free agent, so he could be tendered, and the Steelers have the opportunity to match. If you remember what happened with Emmanuel Sanders several years ago, something similar to that. I think the Patriots were the ones that tendered him, and then again, I think if the team signs and the Steelers don't match or something, there's other wizardry within that too. But throw Mike Hilton out there too, because Mike Hilton, for all intents and purposes, is a starter for how much they play sub-package football as him being your slaughter nickel cornerback. So you're looking at Sean Davis, he didn't play this year. Artie Burns lost his starting job, so you're looking at replacing a starter in Bud Dupree, a starter in Javon Hargrave for sure. And definitely a role player in Nick Vannett, and definitely maybe a role player in B.J. Finney. So you at least have maybe two holes on defense and a potential semi-hole on offense before you even get into, well, let's start fire selling everything. I know people got gift cards for the holidays, for Christmas and whatnot, and you're just itching, you're burning a hole in your pocket. And this is the way they look at this. Well, in order to do all the math and get to whatever Bud Dupree is probably going to need to make, you could ship Ben Roethlisberger off and you could save $8.5 million, Or you could lose $25 million in that dead cap, and then you're going to have to run with Mason Rudolph, Duck Hodges, or Paxton Lynch, because you're not going to be able to afford, after you cut Ben, you're still going to have to cut several other people. You're going to sign Bud Dupree. You're not going to be able to afford another quarterback. So, end of story. They don't have the money to go sign another quarterback. There isn't anyone, I think, that's even out there. We went through the veterans in the last show. You could listen to that over again. So what some of those guys make, that would be even if it is reasonable, it's not realistic.
No, not at all. They look, as it stands right now, they barely have enough money to re-sign their draft picks. They got to come up or to sign the new draft picks when they get them. This is going to be a season for Omar Khan and Kevin Colbert to really be creative. If Bud Dupree is a priority, which, Tomlin has stated he is, and based on how he's played and the belief that they've had in him consistently since they drafted him, I think he is a priority for them. I will not be surprised if they find a way to keep him, whether it's a transition tag, whether it's a franchise tag, that then gives them the time to try and extend the deal. I think they want to try and make this happen. And that's usually that's the first step in getting a deal done, is the want. And Bud has said he wants to stay here. I know we went down this road with Le'Veon Bell. I remember the podcasts that we did, and I remember stating clearly, Le'Veon Bell will say the right things, but Le'Veon Bell does not actually want to do those things. He wants to be a free agent. I don't get that impression from Bud. I get the impression Bud would like to stay. You talked about Finney. That's another issue. And I know we're going to hit on the players that people are all dying to cut. But Finney has played well enough, and when he has started games, has played well enough that he can probably go out and get a nice contract on the free agent market. That's going to make it tough for the Steelers to keep him, especially, in the role that he's been in. The upside is, if you don't remember the viral video that with B.J. Finney after he got drafted, the Steelers were his team. So, he was thrilled to come to Pittsburgh. But at some point, business wins out. And there's a difference between getting a $5 million contract and a $9 million contract, and $4 million is really hard to say no to. So they've got some work, and that this work is not really Tomlin work. This is the guys in the back offices who manage the cap and do their little weird wizardly ways and understand the minutia of how the bargaining agreement and the cap all work. And as you said, we ain't those guys, but we can operate off of what we see, and what we see is there ain't a lot of room right now. So the idea of cutting Ben to get $8 million is ludicrous when you think of what it would cost to get another quarterback of his caliber back in here. Ain't gonna happen. That's out of the question. But the next step to that is, where does that leave them? What are the real options for them? And that's you've done an excellent job of laying that out in this article.
Well, those are the popular ones that everyone likes to put out there. I wanted to add via Ed Bouchette with The Athletic. There's two more to add to the restricted free agents. I knew there was something else that I had missed here. It was Matt Filer and Zach Banner, in addition to Mike Hilton. So just add that there. You have your starting right tackle, your tackle eligible, who's the swing tackle, who's the other guy who would probably slide in if Matt Filer were to leave for some reason. And then, of course, Mike Hilton. And then B.J. Finney is your backup guard. And we have a whole lot of things to say with some of this. But Ed is saying here, that the Steelers have estimated under $3 million. Over the cap has them estimated at nearly $5 million. So they're just under 5 is what it's showing. So, I mean, a lot of this is just, it's what's reported and what people, I think, try and figure out. It's also whatever, I'm not sure where Ed's pulling his information from either, but man, I'll tell you, there's, I just saw Dante Moncrief on here. I wonder if people still remember that, or if they just say Ben was bad at the beginning of the season, or if it was all Moncrief's fault. Remember that? Yeah, I mean, just perspective. You know what I mean? I'm just seeing it that's on here from I guess there's some dead money from him, $1.7 million, but that also factored into that getting maybe that compensatory pick would have been off the board too, which should be as high as a third rounder. I think if it was like a low one, it wouldn't. I don't know what would happen there, but anyway, you got some of your highest paid players, of some of which you're not going to really move on from to make any kind of cap savings. Or you going to move on from like David DeCastro or Cam Hayward? You can't move on from Tuitt. He would completely
hush your mouth.
I know.
Mouth.
It's what I'm saying here. But this is where people they look and they say, who's making all the money? Well, some people still don't even know who Steven Nelson is, or that he's a Steeler, and they see, he would be a cap savings of $5 million, and then it would be a hit of $6 million. You're really looking for what's the lowest dead money with the highest upside in cap savings, and there's two of the names right at the top of the list here. The first one is Mark Barron, and I outlined Mark Barron here. I guess he's become expendable by some of our fans. What's he got? He's around $8.1 million total, I think, this season, upcoming season, with 2.8 dead cap. Hold on, my eyes are glazing over this. Yes, 8.1 million cap number, 2.8 dead, 5.2 savings. So while they can just say la vie with Mark Barron, I don't think people realize just how much he was on the field and how much he played. And people are going to say, well, he stank or stunk. He may be the weakest link, or one of the weaker links, on a defense that has 3 All-Pros from Sporting News and Sports Illustrated, I believe, Brian. We don't have the AP, right? AP's not out yet, or any of the other official stuff. But you got, with all these other All-Pros, somebody's going to look weak. There's going to be some spot there. You can't have 11 All-Pros on one side of the ball, unfortunately. And Mark Barron played an awful lot of time. He played about 70% of the defensive snaps when it comes to playing in. He played in 15 games. Devin Bush, just by comparison, played in all 16, and he played 82%. Vince Williams appeared in 14 games and only played 36% of the defense's 1,100 total plays over the course of the 2019 season. Those numbers come from me. I did all the research on that, just so you're aware. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that so I don't have to credit someone else. Someone else says, where'd you pull that from? Well, I keep logs of all the snap counts, and I have for like the last 5-6 years. receivers. And for all intents and purposes here, Mark Barron is the starting inside linebacker. I mean, I guess Vince Williams gets announced when they bring the defense out, but I'm not sure. Like, I know the professor feels pretty comfortable about Ulysses Gilbert. He may have the skill set to do it, but you're talking about bringing in a second-year guy now into a very significant role, basically a starter. I think the reason Vince Williams isn't out there as much is I think Vince Williams is used almost like a specialist against the run in order to rush the passer. And in those instances, they're using Mark Barron otherwise to drop into coverage. And being a former safety as well, he has a little bit different of a skill set. And we did see very few instances where they had multiple inside linebackers on the field. I want to say they did this against the Ravens at least the first time around. Or they were using like Cam Kelly as like that dimebacker role. So obviously he's out of town now. And I got to bring this up as well because I saw this. Futures and reserves contracts, folks. If they're signing like safeties, it doesn't mean that somebody else is in jeopardy on the roster. Oh, well, that person is a bum. They're going to get rid of him, like Terrell Edmonds or Marcus Allen. It just means they're adding people to the 90-man roster in this offseason to prepare for all the mini camps and eventually training camp, okay? So just chill on that, please. I find that so dumb. Or they say, well, the guy that they signed stinks. And it's like, we don't know anything about this guy, okay? Obviously, he's not on an NFL roster, so maybe you just never know, okay? But anyway, back to Barron. You got him for another year, and getting rid of him means you got to have somebody else to go into that hole. So the whole idea is that you're trying to create less gaps, less spaces, less holes, like not let Bud Dupree go, right? That would be a major, major role to fill. But at the same time now, if you get rid of Mark Barron, you got to fill his role. Do they have somebody that could fill his role? I don't know. I don't think this is a move that they're going to make, but something they could go and do, since he's only on a 2-year deal, so he's only locked up through this next season, through 2020. They could extend this guy. You may be looking at, I've talked about the cap goes up each year. You're looking maybe at a new CBA. There's all kinds of different things. There's other people that are going to come off the books. Their contracts are going to expire. They get old, whatever be the case. So maybe Barron might be a guy they come to, and maybe they lower his cap hit number or for this season and bonus, or do whatever they do with the funny numbers, maybe extend him another year or two if they feel that comfortable with them and keep him on a team. That's going to make some people pull their hair out as the first name I'm mentioning on the podcast. But honestly, if you could still keep the guy and he comes in a little bit lower of a savings for this year, you get to keep him for subsequent years and you get to save some money you could use to re-sign one of these other free agents, then I'm all for it.
There's, as I said, this is where the magic of Omar Khan and Kevin Colbert is going to have to come in. They're going to have to look at everybody's deals, right? And they're going to have to look at finding ways to, am I going to extend this? Am I going to spread this cap hit out? And I know, because you've talked about this, and I think you're absolutely right. With the collective bargaining agreement coming up and needing to be renewed, everybody's a little hesitant to figure out how and when they want to spend this money, and how difficult are you going to be at a disadvantage for pushing money out. Players themselves could be concerned about doing that. But you're right. They're going to have to find ways. And when you look at a guy like Mark Barron, and I've criticized Mark Barron throughout the season at various times,
oh, yeah.
But he has had both ups and downs. But remember, again, this is a new defense for him. Everybody understands it takes time for these things to gel. Devin Bush will be better than he was this season, next season. And, the tandem of them working together can be effective. You just have to see how it extends. And we're not in the same position we were in. Vince Williams is there to take some of this load. But having gotten Bush, we're not stuck with saying, okay, we need Tyler Matakevich on the field. Look, I like Tyler Matakevich. Dirty Red is a great guy. He's a great special teams player. He cannot be the guy we put out there, okay?
No.
So if you're going to get rid of Devin Bush, what are you going to do? And again, Ulysses Gilbert, second-year guy who didn't get really much playing time at all this season, if any, except on special teams.
I don't think you meant Devin Bush.
Didn't I say Ulysses Gilbert? Mark Barron. If you get rid of Mark Barron.
Well, if you got rid of Devin Bush, you would eat
Forget
$11 million, even on a rookie deal.
I'm tired. Leave me alone. I'm old. Sometimes names slip out wrong. But yes, I meant Mark Barron. I don't want to see, Bush and Matakevich out there. I don't want to see necessarily be stuck with seeing Ulysses Gilbert forced to start. Not that I don't have faith that Ulysses Gilbert can be a competitive and productive player. I think he can too. I'm in the professor's camp with that. But he's going to need time to learn. And saying, okay, you're the starter, that may not be the best solution. If they can find a way to reduce Mark Barron's cap hit to start to get some space, extend that contract a couple more years if they want to, I don't have a problem with that at all. Because if you do the contract the right way and Ulysses Gilbert comes along, guess what? Mark Barron's a solid person to have in a backup role if he loses his starting job.
And we're also assuming Vince Williams still has the same kind of lower role that he's had, playing about a third of a game or whatever too. So I mean, they have different guys for different utility things there. And Ulysses Gilbert's also going to be playing special teams if Tyler Matakevich isn't brought back. So I mean, you're talking about how many holes do you have to fill here? Are you going to create more? And I think one of the big ones is the second name that I had, and now I got to look for it again, because you know what? I'm old and tired too. Oh yeah, my favorite guy, Vance McDonald, and everybody immediately is like, okay, this guy's making $7.1 million this year. If you cut him, you're only going to eat 1.4. You're going to get $5.6 million back. So you get rid of Barron and McDonald now, and you have about $11 million, Brian. I still don't. That's like what Bud Dupree made this year on a 5th-year option of a rookie deal. You're still not all the way there. Does anyone here play Monopoly? Raise your hands. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're mortgaging here, and then you can't collect the rent on the mortgaged property. You know what I mean? You can't build houses. So that's what we're into here. We're trying to keep building houses. We're not demolishing things. And I think there's a criticism about Vance McDonald being injured at points and stuff like that, but we just talked about this, I think, on a previous show, or maybe we didn't get into as much detail. I'm going to read what's here on the article. So he's currently the 14th highest paid tight end in the league as far as the cap hit goes. Okay. So if you're counting 32 starting tight ends in the NFL, I'm not talking about teams that may actually start 2 or whatever like that. Let's just say there's 1 starting tight end. There's 32 starting tight ends. Okay. He's 14th, and there are teams that are playing multiple tight ends that are paying more than 1 tight end, more than what Vance McDonald's making. These are the guys that are making a higher salary, overall average, whatever, than McDonald in this upcoming season. Jimmy Graham, I don't know if the return on investment is there, but we'll see. Travis Kelce, okay, deserved. Jordan Reed. You want to talk about a guy that's hurt. Concussions, everything else. A couple of these guys may be heading off into retirement land. Kyle Rudolph, Greg Olson. There's Zach Ertz. There's Delaney Walker, who gets dinged every season too. Trey Burton. There's a guy that hadn't materialized at all. Jared Cook, Darren Waller, Tyler Higbee. That one kind of blew my mind as well. If you're not familiar with Tyler Higbee, he is a tight end for the Los Angeles Rams. So if that name didn't ring a bell, that's who he is. And they have more than one, too, because they have Gerald Everett as well. Jack Doyle for the Colts, and, they have multiple tight ends that they use. And then the remaining tight ends following McDonald, so it drops off here to Tyler Kroft, is it CJ Uzoma or whatever from the Bengals, Nick Boyle, one of the several tight ends for the Baltimore Ravens, Jesse James, TJ Hawkinson, Rhett Ellison, Jeff Harriman, former Ohio State guy, Brian. They couldn't stay healthy, and the Broncos are paying him a pretty healthy salary still. But I think my point is you get the Howerman, Ryan Griffin, Ed Dixon, Max Williams, Jeff Swaim. Okay, Noah Fant's a rookie, so the rookies are still making a decent deal here. Demetrius Harris, Lee Smith, Josh Hill, Virgil Green, O.J. Howard and Hayden Hurst. Several rookies that are there, but you're talking about like, okay, we're going to cut Vance McDonald in order to save some money, but now we're still going to need tight ends because Nick Vannett is also a free agent. Are you going to bring him back? How much are you going to pay him? Probably the same amount of money because this is right in the middle. You're going to be paying him Tyler Kroft, Jesse James type money. If you were to draft a guy, if they in theory had a first-round draft pick and you go and you get a TJ Hawkinson, you're paying the same amount of money, and now you have a guy that isn't experienced not only with the team but in the league. So it could be an upgrade, but man, you're playing with fire here. I don't think you touch anything with Vance McDonald, to be completely honest. He's, I don't know that he's necessarily 100% made of glass, so to speak. Guys at this position can get banged up, and for the most part, how many games did he actually miss? I don't even think he missed as many as some people tend to make it out to be. Let me see. I'm pulling him up too. Vance McDonald only missed 2 games. He missed 2 games the whole season. Ben has missed more than 2 games in a season. As some other guys have missed more than 2 games in a season in the past that are stars on the team and definite, full-time contributors. So I think this is kind of preposterous. This guy went from a fan favorite to a dog this season, just basically based on bad quarterback play. There's no reason to get rid of him.
Not at all. Look, the Vanimal is the Vanimal, right? Was it his best season? No. Was it his fault? No. Yes. He was dealing with a nagging injury a lot of the season, and he played through it most of the time. But the biggest problem was, for a lot of the season, you had a quarterback who couldn't throw over the middle and take advantage of where tight ends tend to make their money.
or give Jim Wexell some credit. I retweeted it yesterday. He was talking. We'll bring this up in another show. But when you have somebody like Ben who's decisive, gets rid of the ball, accurate, versus a guy who holds on to the football, maybe doesn't move well in the pocket, guess what? You got to use somebody like Vance McDonald to block because they're stacking the box and forcing you to make throws that they're not capable of doing and stopping the run. You need extra people to block. That's why the running backs and tight ends weren't targeted at all.
Absolutely. It's also a big part of it. So, there's a variety of reasons why this, was not a great season for the tight ends and the Steelers. And it all kind of boils down to the fact that you're compensating for a massive drop in ability and talent at the quarterback position. When that changes, I really think next year people are going to be surprised at how much better this offense actually is. We will, we'll see when we get there, but that's what I think. And in those straits, again, the best point you bring up about this is if you cut Vance McDonald to gain the paltry cap savings you're going to gain, what are you going to do? You can't go in with Zach Gentry and Nick Vannett, who is also, going to be a free agent. What are you going to do? There's no guarantee you're going to be able to draft a quality tight end and someone who's ready to be a first-year starter. What are you going to do? Bring back Jesse James? That's maybe a possibility at a cheaper rate because he kind of underplayed his contract in Detroit.
but he's not available at the moment.
He's not available unless they cut him.
What do you do? I don't know who else is going to be on the free agent market, but you got to consider even the money that Jesse James made is almost the same as Vance McDonald. And he's going to have, I think, maybe even a higher cap hit. I got to go back and look at that this year. But that puts it all into perspective. And I think some people would be like, well, I would rather have Jesse James back. Well, wouldn't we all? I'm like, it's just, not over Vance McDonald, but just in general, you know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
It's just these things drive me up a wall, Brian. We could go in so many directions with it. Some other names, there was one that was speculative, even by his own admission. Ramon Foster said, he wasn't sure if he was going to be back this year or for next year. 11 years in the league. And just celebrated his 33rd birthday. That's not exactly ancient, but that window is starting to close. You know what I mean? Yep. That's just the way it is. Father Time's going to catch up with you. So he's still signed through next year. He has a base salary of $4 million and a dead cap of about $1.5 million. When you're looking at this, and you're saying 1.5. You could save 4. His total hits 5.5. You got to replace him for at least 4. This might be. I mean, I really don't know what BJ Finney is going to get, though. That's the problem, and that's the major problem with all of this. You look at a guy even like Chris Hubbard, who wasn't even sniffing the amount of success that BJ Finney's had, and BJ Finney is versatile as well. Chris Hubbard signed for 5 years, $36.5 million. Okay, but his first year of his contract was a cap number of 5.8. And then it spreads out and it grows. This year was 7.3. This is for Hubbard, by the way. 7.3 over the next 2, 7, 8, and 8.3. It gets up there and it grows, but so does the cap and everything else. Maybe, I mean, this is kind of the built-in thing, because you got to do something with Filer too, or you're going to lose your right tackle. And I had some ideas about that. Part of that would be bringing Zach Banner back too. You got Chuck Sikora but I mean, man, you got 3 linemen already that are maybe out the door. 3 linemen. How many do they put on the roster usually? 8 or 9 on the active 53, right?
Yep.
And now you're going to cut another one to make savings to sign Bud Dupree. Anything you do with if you do anything with Ramon Foster, it's going to have to be to bring Filer or Finney or both back. That's the way it's going to have to work. I think Filer should probably come. Man, it's tough because Chris Hubbard got that that kind of money. I mean, major starter money for a right tackle, or you're going to have to draft someone. I mean, that's the only other ways you could go about this. This is something where do you create this hole, and if you do, you got to have Plan B in action almost immediately. I don't know that Ramon is somebody that's even somebody that you could really do an extension with, and a player where he's at as far as a veteran. I don't know how much more. So to speak, you can do with this to save any kind of money, because you're only talking about like the dead money was what, 1.7, I think I just said,
yeah,
or 1.5 or 1.5. So I don't know. I mean, it's very likely that Ramon Foster may not be there next year, but it isn't something I would necessarily count on in order to make cap room to sign other guys.
Yeah, the key there is what you just said. If Ramon Foster's not there, which is possible because BJ Finney has been in waiting and has played well enough, and you've got Filer, who's maybe a better guard than he is a tackle, and you make the competition there, it's not because they use that money to get Bud Dupree, but because they use that money to keep some of their other offensive linemen. And that is certainly possibility. If you were to let Foster go, Finney go, and Filer go, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're in real trouble then. So they have to find a way to manage the offensive line. And look, I think that if everything were to work out in the best possible scenario, they'll find a way to sign Bud Dupree to a longer term deal, maybe 4 or 5 year deal. And limit the cap hit this year as best they can, so that they can figure it out. But it's still going to require maneuvering to even get to that point. Worst case, people are saying, well, just slap the transition or, the franchise tag on him. The franchise tag could be as much as $11+ million or more. I don't remember what the defensive end one is. Depends on how he gets categorized. And they don't have the cap room for that even.
Yeah.
So that there's finagling to do that and get to that point. There's a lot of honest truth in the fact that Ramon Foster may not be there. And that's unfortunate. But as you said, it's more a function of you have to continually get younger at positions. And at some point, it's just time to hang them up. I don't know whether Ramon is ready to hang them up or not. It's not that he had a horrible season. And, while the offensive line and Wolfley actually did a good article about the offensive line on the same site that Wexel writes for. And again, it's a function more of, all these different adjustments based on what you're used to. And now you have to deal with something completely different with quarterback play. You just can't say for sure that Ramon or the offensive line really just had a horrible year or that they're on their last legs. I don't know whether whether he'll be gone or not. I kind of hope he's not. I like Ramon Foster. I think he's a good guy in the locker room. I think he's a leader on the team. But yeah, he's reaching the twilight of his career, and I don't want to lose BJ Finney either. So somebody's got to go. along that line, and who it's going to be will be determined to be determined. And I know you got at least one other guy. I don't know if we've gotten to. Yeah, I think it's still. There's only one.
Yeah.
Is there one more?
Well, there's
more?
one more that's really the hot button guy that it sticks out like a sore thumb when you're looking at the highest paid guys. Yep. Okay, so I'm going from the top. This is from the top of the pyramid all the way down as far as who makes the most money on the Steelers roster. Currently, over the cap has 46 total contracted players. Ben Roethlisberger, Stephon Tuitt, David DeCastro, Cam Hayward, Joe Hayden, Marquise Pouncey, Steven Nelson, Alejandro Villanueva, Mark Barron, Vance McDonald, Vince Williams, who, by the way, $6 million dead money, less than $1 million cap savings, not going anywhere.
Nope.
And sandwiched between Vince Williams and then, of course, Ramon Foster, who we talked about, is Anthony Chickillo. And he's goner, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for your service. We appreciate it, but bye.
Not at this contract. 1.1 dead cap space, $5 million savings. That's where you're going to find some of that money, because then when you start to get drilled down through this even more, it's Devin Bush, Tyson Alualu, Chris Boswell. Boswell doesn't even he would lose money doing anything. There's nothing you could do with his contract. He don't even make that much money, $3.5 million for a cap number. T.J. Watt, Terrell Edmonds, a lot of these guys are on rookie contracts. Jordan Berry, okay, you might save $1.8 million there. A lot of people will be happy about that. $375,000 in dead cap. They could probably bring in somebody that's, off the street that's going to make like $500,000 or something of that nature. You know what I mean? But even when you look at that, you're talking about nickels and dimes here. You're not talking about dollars, because 1.8, you're going to absorb a good deal of that just to get another punter signed and put on the roster, unless the guy you brought to the futures contract. Some of these futures contracts, some of the guys from like last year, for example, $585,000 for like a Robert Spillane. You know what I mean? So that's what you're talking about there. So you still got to sign somebody else. You got to have somebody that kicks the ball, unless that's what Ben's going to transition into because he can't throw. Who do you go to in order to save some money? And you got to be thinking ahead, because you know what's looming, Brian. Juju Smith-Schuster, T.J. Watt. You don't have to worry about Minkah for several years. There's going to be other guys that might, go over the horizon, including Ben, that may retire by that point. But I think you go to the other offensive linemen. I mean, how many more times can you go back to Ben and Stephon Tuitt? They're usually the ones who end up having something moved around. In 2019, Ben had a base salary of $2.5 million, but he had a huge bonus. Like I said, they put it all up front. It was 18.7 as a prorated part of the bonus, the roster bonus of $5 million. His cap number was 26, but his cap number goes to 33 with a base of 8.5 this year. The following year is a base of 4. And then, next it would be 2021 would be the only out. You would eat 12.5 and save 19 when it comes to Ben. So you can't even move on from him for yet. You're thinking another year. But do you go back to somebody like Ben or Stephon Tuitt, who his base salary was that was 2018, $805,000. It wasn't even a full million. His cap number was up to 9.7. It's going to inflate to almost $15 million for each of the next 3 years. That's the guy that you probably go to with his huge contract and try and get something worked out to where you could, hey, you know what, we need to try and bring your teammate back, the guy who maybe sits next to you or stalled down in the locker room. And I think that they go to the offensive linemen and do the same. They could go to Alejandro Villanueva and David DeCastro or Marquise Pouncey and maybe bleed a penny here or there out of those guys and try to get, Filer, Banner, and or Finney back in line too. Unfortunately, that may mean saying goodbye to Ramon Foster in the process, but that's pretty much all they could do. They're pretty cash strapped. Bringing any of these guys back is going to be difficult. They got to look at least the franchise tag. I'm not sure what's the franchise tag hovering at for an edge rusher. 16? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's that high. I don't know. I'm going to try and look it up while we're talking. But I want to make a point about Stephon Tuitt. You're right. one of the best ways they have, and we'd have to finagle with this for a while and look at everybody's contract, is going to be like a restructure or even an extension to Stephon Tuitt's contract, where they could maybe clear anywhere from $5 to $7 million in cap space doing something like that. But again, that's a function of you're pushing the ball down the road. And for this team, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Look, when Ben retires, if you haven't accepted that you're going to have some slim years where you're going to have mediocre quarterback play, probably, or at best average, if you haven't given yourself over to that fact, you probably should. And so, sometimes you push this stuff down the road in order to try and win now. And the Steelers are with Ben's contract having 2 years left, basically, probably, it's unlikely he plays much beyond that, but who knows if he still feels good. But while you've got him is when you have to take advantage of it. And so it's not unreasonable to think that they might be willing to find ways to push this money down the road and see what it is to be. But, as you're talking about the franchise tags, I couldn't find it. I don't know what it is.
Well, it may not be fully established yet, but there may be a ballpark. I'm wondering what it was last year, or if it even pertained to anyone who signed a contract. But I could guarantee you it's more than the $11 million that was on the rookie fifth-year option. So,
yeah, it is. It is, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of money you're probably looking at for Bud. I'm sure you look at somebody like, I wanted to bring up what you were saying, just to kind of elaborate. If Ben retires, this happened like with Troy, with Heath, maybe a few others, where they were still paying him like a year or two after they were no longer on the roster and actively playing for the Steelers, and they were rolling with guys that were on rookie contracts, and that's how they were kind of making up the difference there. And you could certainly see that if Ben came off the books and retired. It all depends on what Mason Rudolph, if he's the guy, unless they draft somebody else, what he might make, because by the time Ben probably hangs up his cleats, it's going to be time to re-sign Rudolph or make a decision there. I can guarantee you he's not going to get the 5-year, $137.5 million that Jimmy Garoppolo got as a backup, unless he sees some substantial playing time. I'm trying to look up. See, it's tough because, I want to say some of the guys, like, you have 4-3 and you have 3-4 guys. So you're looking at defensive ends versus, outside linebackers and whatnot. Olivier Vernon with the Cleveland Browns, and he signed this contract with the Giants, is got a cap number of $15.5 million. So we're probably not too far off there. I'm going to see if I could find, let's see, edge rusher, 3-4 outside linebacker. Oh, yeah. Why not? Khalil Mack and Von Miller. right at the top. Average per year, which isn't necessarily the same as a cap hit. This is an average over the life of their contract. I mean, Khalil Mack was at $141 million, and Von Miller is, making chump change compared to that at $114. They're both into the six figures there, as far as not six figures. You know what I'm saying? The $100 million guys when it comes to their contracts. So Khalil Mack is somewhere at like 23.5 average a year. Von Miller's at 19. Zadarius Smith, Chandler Jones, and Jadeveon Clowney are all hovering in about the 15-16 range, and then it drops into like the 13s and 12s when you're talking about Whitney Merciless, Preston Smith, Dante Fowler, Ryan Kerrigan, and then the rest of these guys aren't, they're a lot lower. Like Cameron Wake is making just under $8 million. Terrell Suggs was still making $7 million for the Cardinals this year. So just to give you an idea, I don't think Bud Dupree, and believe it or not, let me keep going down this list. Terrell Suggs, Bradley Chubb, Kyle Van Noy, Kareem Martin, Clay Matthews had an average of 4.6. Anthony Chickillo is right after Clay Matthews. That just seems a little ridiculous for me. But Bud Dupree was making 3.6 on average on his original deal. He's not going to want to make less money. That's not how this works, especially when you have the year he just had. So I guarantee you're looking at 16 or somewhere in the whereabouts. It's got to be. In fact, whenever somebody signs a new contract, it's usually bigger and better. That one's not going to be Bud Dupree. That's going to be TJ Watt's contract in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, I took a look, and that over the cap website is it's if you want to try and understand it, you can. I just kind of don't try and figure out their back ends of it, but they've added some ways to try and say how can you get savings.
Yeah.
And when you flip the restructure or extensions on, the Steelers have some opportunities with extending people, but you're talking about extending all of the top level guys: Ben, Tuitt, DeCastro, Hayward, Joe Hayden, Pouncey. These are also not, other than maybe Tuitt a little bit, the younger guys.
Yeah.
These are guys who are on the ends of their career kind of contracts rather than the beginnings.
Well, wait a second.
But,
Cam's only what's Cam, 30 or 31?
Yeah, I mean, Cam is, but here's it is. It's an extension, and I actually don't think that's a bad idea for Cam.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, restructuring gets you nothing with Cam Hayward because his contract is for next year, and then he's after that. So it's possible they come up with some ways. There's money they can find, but again, you have to remember that it's not money that just appears. It's money they're pushing down the road, and it puts them in a position, especially if you extend somebody like Ben, where you are more than likely paying him after he's retired, and that could be the case with guys like DeCastro and Pouncey and Hayden as well. So you end up with a lot of dead cap money that you have to live through. The Steelers have been in that position before. We remember, how strapped they were after they gave Lamar Woodley a bleep ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, did anybody argue that back at that point, though?
No, of course not, because you thought, okay, he's doing great, and we're going to be fantastic, and it's going to continue. And then, I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult Lamar Woodley because I like Wood, but he kind of turned into a lump.
Couldn't stay healthy. I mean, it's just it's unfortunate. He lit the world on fire, and that's like another thing. When you have a player that you draft like him alongside a guy who's like a defensive MVP, like James Harrison, talk about raising the expectations. When the Steelers defense was on fire like that, Woodley and Timmons were on rookie deals. They struck gold with those two guys, and you got to kind of, and that's kind of what happened this year already. You still have Bud on a rookie deal, Watt on a rookie deal, Minka Fitzpatrick on a rookie deal, Devin Bush, obviously, and a couple of others, Javon Hargrave. And we're going to be talking about, I know we're up against it here, and of course, we need more topics for future shows. So we will talk about the priorities. Now that we've talked about how, we pretty much peed in everyone's Cheerios and said, well, this is going to be tough next year. It most certainly will be, but we'll talk about who the priorities are, who you could get away with and without signing in probably our next episode, Brian. So any closing thoughts, my friend?
I still don't like toast.
Aw, shame on you. I know Christmas was, last month, basically. It's in the rearview mirror. But Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I look at you like all the elves looked at Hermie who didn't want to make toys when you say that about toast. Shame on you.
Oh, well, whatever. Bump you, Hermie. Here's something. For those of you who enjoy the grown-ass man hashtag and the ref stink hashtag, I made shirts. And if you want to know about them, let us know, and we'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know. We'll try and get them up on the website and overhaul some things here once the NFL season's completely closed, since we won't have a whole lot of other time to do some other things. But we still keep some things. At least one thing goes up on the website every day, so be sure to check it out at stillcityunderground.com. This show always at least twice a week, so we appreciate when you like, comment, and subscribe. And sometimes we will like and comment as well, depending on what you have to say. So, Brian, thanks for joining me once again today. His name's Brian E. Roach. My name is Joe Kuzma. Until next time, we encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.